G'day, my name is Damned, and in this tutorial we're going to build a character sheet for Dungeon World using vanilla MoreCore. The Dungeon World character sheet is really well set up to get you started playing really quickly. All the information is already on the character sheet and all you need to do is make some selections. We'll start by logging into Fantasy Grounds as a player, connecting to our GM session, and then going to the character selection window and creating a new character. We'll start with the really basic information. We're going to choose a fighter character. So we're going to choose a name from the list. We're going to be human, so we're going to choose Rudiger, the fighter. We're going to zero out hero points, and we're going to choose a character portrait. We'll click on the Notes tab, and we'll add in some extra information such as our race, our gender, our age. We'll put in our appearance. Rudiger is built. He's got eager eyes. He's got wild hair, callous skin, and his alignment is neutral. The next thing we're going to do is set up our attributes, so strength, dexterity, constitution, etc. So we'll go back to the MoreCore tab and we'll right click in the attributes frame and we'll create a new role and we'll call it strength. In the dice string field we'll add /PBTA space 2d6, then we'll scroll down to enable formula and tick that. We'll enter in the parameter formula again, /PBTA space 2d6, then we'll add plus P2. We'll tick hide parameters for P3 and we'll change P1 name to score and P2 name to modifier. Once we've done that, we can close that window and then we can drag and do that 5 times to create 5 copies. Then we could go into each one of those and change the role name from strength to each of the other attributes so that we end up with strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. You'll see that they order alphabetically. Looking back at the character sheet from the rulebook, we'll see that we get to add certain values to our character sheet. We get to add one attribute with a 16, which gives a modifier of 2, another one with 15 and a modifier of 1, an attribute of 13 and a modifier of 1, an attribute of 12, another one of 9, and then a final attribute of 8 with a -1 modifier. So I'm going to fill those in on my attributes. Being a fighter, I've chosen strength at 15 and I've chosen constitution at 16. So you can see that I've put in the first of those boxes, I've put in the score, and then the second one I've put in the modifier value. Next to the modifier value you'll see a DW button and you'll also see a shield icon. Now the shield icon is how you access the role to edit the role, and the DW icon is how you make the roll. So I'm going to click on the DW for Constitution, so I'm going to do a Constitution roll, and you will see that it's rolled 2d6 and it's added my +2 modifier and it's given me a result of 9 and it's declared that as a success with cost. Next I'm going to set up a damage roll for my character. Now fighters do 1d10 damage regardless of the weapon that they use. So I'm going to set up a new roll, we're going to call it damage, and we're going to use this dice string of DB damage. Now I'm also going to enable the formula and I'm going to make the formula DB damage 1d P1 plus P2. I'm going to hide the P3 field, I'm going to call the P1 name damage dice, and the P2 name will be bonus damage. I'm going to save that roll and we're going to make a roll, and you can see there that I've rolled a 2 after I've rolled the 1d10. There are lots of different roll options to choose from, and I chose DB damage because DB damage will allow player to roll damage, and if they've targeted an opponent it will automatically apply that damage to the target in the combat tracker. So DB damage is a really good roll for damage rolls. Working back from my character sheet, I need to create a bond with a party member. So for the bond for the party member, I've set this one up as a mod roll. So I've put in here, I've named the person in my party. So we've got a druid in the party whose name is Thistle. And the bond I've chosen is I worry about the ability of Thistle to survive in the dungeon. And you can see there that this is just a /mod1. I haven't used formulas for this one. So we've just put everything into the dice string. And you can see that the icon for this roll is a modifier. If I click that, you'll see in the bottom left hand corner of the screen that the +1 modifier is now enabled, and it will also add the description. Thistle, I worry about the ability of Thistle to survive in the dungeon, to the next roll I make. Going to keep working back from the character sheet. So the next one is I need to choose my fighter moves, and the first one is roll, and I've set this one up initially as a modifier. So I've put in there the description, my signature weapon, and I've chosen the options. So my weapon is named the Hammer of Rudiger. Now I haven't named it after myself. Rudiger, my name is Rudiger, and I am the son of Rudiger, my father. So this weapon is a hammer. It's used in close quarters. It's bloodstained. It's huge, so it gains the messy and forceful tags, and it also has spikes, so it gains +1 damage and also +1 weight. So in my dice string I've now got a /mod +1, and again I haven't needed to use the formula for this one. To use this, I click on the modifier roll, so I click on the +- next to the Hammer of Rudiger, and that'll add a modifier slot. So I click on the +- next to the Hammer of Rudiger, and that'll add a modifier slot, and it'll also add the description, Hammer of Rudiger, messy, forceful. Then when I roll damage, you'll see there in the chat window that it says Rudiger damage from, and then in brackets it's got Hammer of Rudiger, messy, forceful, +1. And then you can see my roll of an 8 has then had the +1 added to it. If we set this up as a modifier, all the descriptions from the modifier, from that modifier's name, will get added to the roll, so you can see the descriptions playing out in the chat when you make your rolls, and other people can see how you've assembled your roll and put that together. The next fighter move we're adding is called Armored. This one is you ignore the clumsy tag on any armor you wear, so there's no roll associated with this. So by leaving the dice string blank, you can see it will simply output a description into the chat window. This next roll, you'll see something a little bit trickier. We've created a bend bars lift gates roll, and we're going to use the /PBTA roll again. So we're setting it up as /PBTA space 2d6, and then we're going to use +A. Now A is a dynamic field that we can drag the modifier, so bend bars lift gates uses the strength modifier. So you can see on my character sheet for the strength of 15 with the modifier of 1. So I drag the 1 into the A field, and then that 1 is now referenceable by the A in brackets. So if I change my score, my 15 becomes a 16, my modifier goes from +1 to +2, that roll will automatically update, and instead of being a +1, it'll be a +2. You can see when I make this roll update, and instead of being a +1, it'll be a +2. You can see when I make this roll that a +1 is added to the roll, and that's coming from my strength modifier. Again, working from the character sheet, the next move we need to make is Reroll Damage. Once per battle, you may re-roll a single damage roll, yours or someone else's. So in this situation, there's no roll specific to this move, we just need to declare the move. So we just set it up without any dice string or parameters set up, and it will write it to chat. So I make a damage roll, I roll 4, it's a really important fight, it's the end scene, and I really needed to deal more damage. So I use this move, Reroll Damage, and I roll the dice again. Fortunately, the dice gods are not in my favour, and I roll another 4, but I got to use that move. So we now get to choose some advanced moves, or my first advanced move, and I'm going to choose Merciless Damage. Now that's another damage roll. So what I'm going to do is just drag the existing damage roll into a blank spot in the character sheet, still under stats, and then I'm going to edit that roll. I'm going to rename it Merciless Damage, and then so I'm keeping the DB damage roll, and then I'm going to close that, and I'm going to change the 10 to a 4 because it's a bonus 1d4 damage. And that's all I need to do for that roll. To use this roll, after I make a successful hit and I roll my normal damage, I would then roll my Merciless Damage, and it would apply an additional 1d4 damage to my target. Additionally, I could set it up as a modifier, or in this case, a boon roll. Now a boon roll will roll 1d4, setting up as with the following string. It will roll an additional 1d4 and it will add it to the modifier. And what that will do is you will see when I make my main damage roll following that the Merciless Damage descriptions are added to the roll. So this is one of many places where you have different options to set up your character sheet in different ways, and you can set them up in a way that suits how you like to play or how you like to run your game. Being that I'm going to use my Hammer of Rudiger almost all the time when I'm fighting, especially as I get the extra damage from this weapon and it's my signature weapon, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a damage roll that includes my modifier for that one. So I'm simply going to make a copy of the first damage roll we've created by dragging it into an empty spot. I'm going to rename this roll Damage Hammer of Rudiger. I'm going to put the messy and forceful tags in there in brackets, and when I close that dialog, I'm going to change the modifier box from a 0 to a 1, and that's to reflect the +1 damage for that weapon. So when I roll using this new roll, I will roll 1d10 and it will automatically add the +1 to that. I could combine that with the Merciless boon roll, or I could do the Merciless damage roll separately. And you'll see some options on that again as we go a bit further. We're now going to set up the most commonly used moves, which are the basic moves. Now these moves are common to all characters. So the first of those is Hack and Slash. So that's a combat move where you're using a melee weapon here, and you can see there's some extra information in there, such as if you get a 10+ on your roll, you may choose to do an extra 1d6 damage but expose yourself to the enemy's attacks, or on a 7 to 9 you deal your damage to the enemy and the enemy makes an attack against you. So there are some extra parts in here, but Hack and Slash also uses strength. So you can see it says roll plus strength. So what we do is we add our formula in here, /PBTA 2d6 plus, and we're going to put in the A field again. We'll hide all the parameters, the P1, P2, P3, and then we will drag the strength modifier into the A field, and that will keep your strength modifier and this roll in sync going forward. Now when I make my roll using Hack and Slash, it will automatically add my strength modifier. Later on in the game, my strength score might increase, so I change that to a 16 and I increase the modifier to a 2. Now when I use the Hack and Slash roll, it will add the extra +2 instead of a +1 to that roll. The next roll is Volley. So Volley is very much similar to Hack and Slash, except it uses ranged weapons, but there are also some other options in here. So when you roll high, you get to choose from these additional options. So the other part with Volley is that instead of it being linked to, you can see there, that it's roll plus dex. So we're going to scroll down to the A field and we're going to drag the dexterity modifier in instead. Now Rudiger is not the most dexterous. He has a dexterity of 8, so he has a penalty of -1. So when he rolls using Volley, he's going to get a -1 on all of those rolls. I'm going to duplicate the roll again. And this one we're going to do Defy Danger. Now Defy Danger is a little bit different. It's a special roll that lets you choose which attribute you're going to do, but you need to do it based on the story. So if you were going to dodge out of the way of the danger, you would use your dexterity. If you were going to engage in some mental challenge, use your mental acuity to overcome the challenge, you would use your wisdom. If you were going to use charm or social graces, you would use charisma. So depending on what type of skill you're going to use, you're going to get a different modifier in this. So what we're going to do is set our parameter formula here to being 2d6 plus P1 rather than A, and we're going to change P1 to be modifier. We're going to right click on the ref field A and clear that. We're going to change the parameter field to P1. We'll save this roll, and what you need to do then is before you use the Defy Danger roll, you would need to enter in manually the modifier. So if you were going to use your Constitution, you would then put a +2 into the Defy Danger modifier field and then make that roll. I've gone through and I've set up the rest of the basic moves, and I'm down to one called Aide or Interfere. So Aide or Interfere, yes, they are two opposing actions. So I'm going to create the Aide roll first, and the Aide roll gives you a +1, and Interfere gives you a -2 on that roll. So I am going to create the Aide roll first. I'm going to use the P1 field to put the modifier in, putting a value of 1 in, and then I'm going to drag that Aide roll into a blank spot, which will duplicate it. I'm going to edit that roll and call it Interfere, and then I'm going to change that modifier value from a +1 to a -2, and then I've got the two different rolls there, Aide and Interfere. Next, my character sheet says that I should add some inventory onto my character sheet. So I'm going to add my scale armor. And scale armor provides some armor rating, which in Dungeon World is damage resistance. So I have a 2 armor rating, so I get to subtract 2 damage from all damage rolls that are inflicted on me. But it also has the tag clumsy, and it also has 3 weight. Now I have a skill which we set, a move which we added to the character sheet earlier, that says for the armored skill you ignore clumsy for worn armor. So I'm going to remove that from the description. You can see I've added in the weight. I've added in some healing potions, number of 2, they have 0 weight. You can see at the bottom of the screen the total weight is now 3, which is all from the armor, but as we add some additional items in, the extra weight will get added. And finally there's 22 coins. Now, going back to the MoreCore tab, where most things happen in the MoreCore tables, I'm going to add 2 to my defense value, and that's from my armor, and that will give me a damage reduction of 2 against certain types of dice rolls. Now that character sheet is largely done, except we're now going to go back and we're going to change some of our damage rolls to a different roll. Instead of DB damage, we're going to change it to damage DR. So DB damage for a system where the target's armor or defense makes them harder to hit, so makes them more challenging to hit. Now, in Dungeon World, a defender's armor reduces damage, so we have another roll called damage DR, and what that does is it looks at the target's defense value and it subtracts that number from the damage being dealt. Now we've got some moves such as Merciless Damage which add extra damage to our roll. So because Merciless Damage is not dealt by itself, we don't want to have the damage reduction apply separately to that. So we can leave Merciless Damage as DB damage. And we also, remember, had in Hack and Slash, if we rolled 10 plus, if we rolled 10 plus, we could choose to deal extra damage. So I'm going to duplicate the Merciless Damage, and I'm going to call it bonus damage, but the bonus damage is not 1d4, it's 1d6. So I'm going to change the 4 to a 6, and when I use that roll, it will add an extra d6 of damage, and it will ignore the damage resistance. I'm going to just do a couple of sample rolls in the combat tracker. So the GM has kindly thrown a troll at me, and I've rolled my attack, my hack and slash, and it's a success with cost. So we'll ignore the cost for the moment, but we'll do our damage. So to apply the damage, we need to target the troll. So I've control clicked on the troll to target them, and you can see on the combat tracker it lists targets as troll. I'm going to use Rudiger, and when I roll that damage, you can see that it's using the DR roll, and I've rolled a 6. I get the +1 from my hammer, so 6 + 1 is 7, but you can see in the description that only 6 damage was applied, and that's because the troll has 1 damage reduction. When I roll the Merciless Damage, which just uses the DB damage roll, there is no damage reduction. So the whole damage from that roll is applied. And just for the sake of this video, I've rolled another damage, and you can see in the combat tracker the troll's icon has changed to a skull, as the troll has taken more damage than their hit points or health, and they are now deceased. There are lots of different ways of setting up some of these rolls. Different GMs will have different preferences, and perhaps different players will have different preferences. But this is a sample of how you might go about choosing what types of rolls to set up for your character sheet, and a good example of how to set up a Dungeon World character. Please, if you do set up some characters for Dungeon World, export the characters as XML and upload them to the forums so that other people can use those characters and get playing on their games much faster. Keep rolling dice and telling great stories.